right. While people file into the room, we'll just take a second here. And Alicia, welcome back from the wilds of Oregon and a long, hot, sweaty 10-day camp out. It sounds like fun. Hot, sweaty stuff I might leave behind, but I love camping in the fall. Fall is amazing. Even the winter here, because our winter, it's pretty easy, pretty lightweight. But I do like camping. Love getting out. So welcome. Thanks for taking some time to join us. Those of you who are here, Alicia is going to be teaching today on converting QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. Before I turn it over to her, I am going to share my screen real quickly. So I want to make sure everyone is aware of what we're doing over here at Scaling New or Scaling New Heights at Insightful Accountant, which we launched at Scaling New Heights, and it's our Be Insightful Premium Content Program. It's basically a training program with select content that will be posted out onto this site that you're seeing here. But basically, the point of it is to help deepen your knowledge, help you stay informed, and connect kind of with community, keeping it really short here on the front end of this webinar. And so we have a variety of tracks. There's 9 different training tracks, downloadable resources, webinars like this one, recorded and transcribed webinars as well that are available to members. Anybody who joins this membership prior to October the 30th is entered into a drawing for a $5,000 travel voucher, which will be planned by a travel spy. And then here's what we have lined up from a training perspective. We have Murph is doing a series on app comparisons, and it's him working with other people within the community. Like our first one is e-commerce that we're doing. I think it's in September, and it's him, Jeff Siegel, Don Brolin, and Kelly Gonzalez are looking at a variety of apps in that session. And we have niche marketing for accounting firms. We have a tech stack session. We have migrating from desktop Pro Plus, and that's in sync with today's session as well. We have your tax practice in depth. We actually have the first session tomorrow of all of these, and that is that tax one, which is tomorrow at noon. Your Firm Accelerated, which is being presented by QB Express, and it's really a sales focus, how to grow your business. We have a human resources track, a coach's corner, and then practical automations, looking at how do we automate steps in the firm to get out of the drudgery so I can go do what I like to do and what I'm better at versus all the tasks that come with running a business, running a firm, and having people. Real briefly, if you go out to blog.insightfulaccountant.com, you'll see this article here, July 31 desktop deadline looms, which we know they push that deadline out till September. There is a handout that's associated with that article again, and I'll put these links in the chat once I go dark. But this is premium content, but Murph put countless hours into a white paper. He called it a blue paper because it's blue, but it's looking at your options. If you're leaving desktop, what are your options? You have options out there. Where are you going to go? And so he does a really good comparison of what those are. So I will stop sharing my screen again. I'll put these into the chat once I get off of the screen. And then before I turn it over, this is a CPE eligible webinar. And as you know, if you've been to CPE eligible webinars, you have to be here for 50 minutes, 50 minutes. And you know that you must participate in at least 3 of the poll questions. We do have 4. Alicia doesn't even know about the 4th one that I added prior to this. And like I said, Alicia, since for some reason, I don't see the polls, so I'm glad you're able to see them. Can you post the one that's called, I think it's called poll 1. No, it's not poll 1. It's like maybe Be Insightful poll 1.
There you go.
If you could post that, that would be great. And so basically we're just saying, hey, I just shared some information about our Be Insightful program. Would you like us to send some information? We're not a big spam company. We're not going to hammer you. We're just going to send you some info and say, hey, if you want more, let us know. We'll be happy to share it with you. So we'll give just a couple more minutes because I know Alicia has a ton to cover here. and I don't want to take up too much on the front end. So we'll give this about 5 more seconds, and then we will turn it over. So we'll give a countdown: 3, 2, and 1. Anybody else? Last minute takers. Here we go. All right. Thank you, Alicia. Thanks again for being here. And I will turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. Yet again, I really enjoy doing these QB talks. So let me go ahead and dive right on in. Okay, can everybody see my presentation converting QBDT to QBO? So this is a hot topic these days that, as we all know, Intuit is moving people into online as best as they can, with the exceptions of some industries that still need to be on desktop, like manufacturing and heavy construction. But QBO has really come into its own, and we're at the point now where there's very few companies that really still need desktop. And so, as we have seen, they are in the process of raising the prices this fall. And the complaint that people had that like, QBO was so expensive compared to desktop is no longer a thing, because now desktop is going to be more expensive than QuickBooks Online. So this is now the time to start thinking about, if you still have clients on desktop, how many are you're going to be moving into QuickBooks Online and how. So this topic has been really popular. Back in the fall, I did what was supposed to be one episode of the unofficial QuickBooks Accountants podcast with Hector, where he saw my SOP that I had for when I do migrations, which was a 5-page outline, literally like step by step, and all the considerations and all the things to think about. And he's like, wow, this would make a great podcast episode. And we only got through like the first half of a page before we were done. And so it turned into a 5-episode series. So way back in like September or October, episodes 23, 24, 25, 26, and then 28 were all about migrations. And so there was so much juice there that I decided, well, what if I took that outline and I actually wrote it out? And that all of a sudden became a 70-page book that I was like, you know what? Might as well publish another book. So it's now up on Amazon, called The Comprehensive Guide to Converting from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. So it's 70 pages of all the stuff that I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to present the material to you, but if you would like it in written form, please do support the author. The book is only $9.99. I kept it under $10, so it was completely accessible to everybody. If you like today's content and would like to hold it in your sweaty little palms, then definitely go to Amazon and put it in order. Okay, so I'm not going to spend much time about me. Most of you at this point know me. My name is Alicia Katz Pollock. I'm the founder and CEO and QBO rockstar at learn.royalwise.com, where I have a vast QBO training library, starting from I've never seen it before, I love desktop, I hate QBO, all the way up through year-end closes and advanced bookkeeping. And so if you like my training style, definitely check out all of my courses. There's over 100 different courses, sales tax, payroll, QBO in general, and all of it's geared either for you as a bookkeeper or tax professional, or for your clients as well. I teach everything role agnostic, because hey, software is software. So let's go into our agenda. So I'm going to talk today about doing conversions, starting with how to manage the project and how to approach a conversion project. We'll talk about the different versions of QuickBooks Online, how to prep for migration, the actual act of converting the desktop file, what you should do after conversion, and then also what I call concierge services, which is basically how you can turn this into a revenue stream for yourself. That I have, well, I'll get there. Okay. Throughout today's presentation, you're going to see occasional little QR codes and links. Those are courses that I have that are related to the content. So if there's a particular topic that I'm talking about, but you don't have the background knowledge, or you want more information, or you have a staff member to train, take note of that URL, and then you can go check out that class later on. Okay, now it's time for my first poll. Let me know, how many conversions have you done? I want to know if I'm talking to like people who are experts or people who have never done this. We're getting, wow, a whole range from 0 to 5 is the clear winner, and then we have a lot of 6 to 25s, and we even have a couple who have done over 100. So we've got some pros on this call. And as you're working on this poll, know that this is designed to be an interactive webinar. I encourage you to go over to the Q&A pane. If you have questions that you want me to build into what I'm talking about, you can head over to Q&A and put it in there. You're also welcome to use the webinar chat and chat amongst yourselves or give feedback. I love it when people use the reactions in the Zoom and give me, celebrations or thumbs up. It makes me not feel like I'm talking to an empty room. Okay, it looks like we have, here's the results of the first poll and where y'all are at. Okay, excellent. So most of you have done at least one conversion. All right. So the first step in doing a conversion is planning ahead. Don't just jump in there and do it. You do have to actually manage the project. Now, the first thing that you have to manage, even beyond the ins and outs of the software, is people's emotions. Change is hard. People don't want to struggle. People don't want to have to learn something new. They've got enough going on in their lives. And so sometimes learning new software can be a really big challenge, especially if your audience is tech challenged. This change is hard, is both on the accountant side and on the user's side. Now, some of you have decades of experience in QuickBooks Desktop, and you are an amazing expert at what you do. Your knowledge is just really amazing. And moving over to QBO, where you're essentially starting over again from scratch, can be really daunting. That you have to start over again. The software is not the same. Even though it has the word QuickBooks in it, people go in with the expectation that it's just picking up desktop and putting it in a web browser, and it's entirely 100% different software. And so that's what you have to communicate to your clients, or if you're the accountant making the migration yourself, that's the first thing that you have to realize, is that the only thing they have in common is the word QuickBooks, and that it's a general ledger program that helps you analyze your business and pay your taxes, but how it does it is 100% different. So when you are helping a company move over to online, you can't just plunk them in. You have to really get them emotionally ready. And the best thing to do is get them excited about it. When you come from the benefits, when you come from the opportunities, when you come from all the time-saving workflows and the ability to change how they were doing things, like maybe they had to keep some data in a spreadsheet because desktop didn't have the ability to process it, but now they can do it right in QBO and they don't need the spreadsheet anymore. That's where the joy comes from. And so I always really focus on the opportunities, what can be different, what can save them time, and what are all the benefits. And then you get people who are really excited and jazzed to learn it, instead of, I don't want to have to do this. It's a lot harder to do when people are all crunched up about it. So you want to really focus on the joy in the change. Now, when you are doing a migration, there's different styles of migration. The scope can go from just simply, I'm uploading your file, boom, we're done. In which case it might just take an hour or 3. Or then after you do the migration, then you connect the banking feeds, you go over the settings, you set up the sales tax, you set up the payroll, you set up QuickBooks payments, and you set up all of the modules to get them up and running. That is another level of engagement. once you get there, a lot of the time you find that you need cleanup. One of the things that's really interesting to me about desktop versus online is that you could be doing something wrong in desktop for 10 years and never know. And then when you move over to QuickBooks Online, all of a sudden it becomes glaringly obvious that your data is wrong. Part of that comes from just fresh eyes. You could be looking at the exact same balance sheet in desktop versus online, but when you look at it online, you're like, well, what's that liability about? And then you realize that there's been something on the balance sheet that has been there for the past 5 years that was a mistake, like an expense categorized to payroll liabilities, and then it just sits on the balance sheet absolutely forever. So I love taking this as an opportunity to not just migrate the software, but to take a look at the data and make sure that the data is actually accurate. Another example of a cleanup that happens after the fact is billable expenses. In desktop, there's an option in the settings that it marks all expenses as billable. And every time you do, it pops up a little confirmation window, and then people dismiss the confirmation window, and then you never see it again. And that means that they've been marking every single expense ever as billable because they're thinking in their head, oh, well, I'm getting billed for it. Not, I'm going to bill my client for it on the next invoice. So when you migrate over to QBO, you look at the unbilled expenses, and there's 100,000 of them totaling $1.7 million. And that's because it was swept under the rug in desktop. And there it is now in front of your face in QBO. So one option in doing a conversion is building in cleanup so that you look at the reports and you actually examine everything that has come over historically and decide, okay, do I want to, is this right? Do we want to actually fix it all as well? Another level of doing a conversion is completely overhauling their entire financial workflows completely from scratch. I always start with what reports do they want to run? That if the reports that they have now don't represent the reports that they want to see, this is a whole opportunity to expand. Because, for example, QuickBooks Online has locations where desktop doesn't. So if you've had them and tags as well. So if they've been using classes and their classes are 7 deep and then they have to inactivate them and reactivate them and they're time-based, now you have a chance to say, well, hey, would it be helpful to be able to run your reports by department or by location or to label transactions? And then you have an opportunity to completely renovate how they've been doing their whole entire business. I just did this in January for Farmers Conservation Alliance, which is a nonprofit, but essentially they're construction where they do watershed projects and in drought-stricken areas to bring water to farmers. And they've been using their QuickBooks fine for 15 years. But when I started talking to them, they realized that they wanted to be able to run everything by not just their grant funders, but then also by state. And we realized that we could put in locations, but if we were going to do that, then maybe we should change how they were using their classes. And we literally spent a week going through all of their data and designing their reports and how they wanted their reports, and then what features in QuickBooks would give them that data. And it completely changed how the entire company ran, really. And so what I'm getting at here with this whole scope conversation is that this is an opportunity for you to expand your services, that it's not just uploading it and going, that you can bring your expertise to the table and create this whole value added, that doing a data upload could just be a couple hours and a couple $100. But looking at that purple bar that I did with FCA, that was a $40,000 project over the scope of a month. So like that's what I did that month. But all of my money, all of my revenue that month came from doing one QB desktop conversion. So when you can find those, That is absolutely the way to do it. And so what I want you to think of as I'm going through all of the next steps is how can I expand my services and turn this into a revenue stream? Okay, so one other thing when we're talking about managing the expectations and the emotions behind it is training. You can't just dump them in and expect them to go. You want to do your training before you do the cut date, like the day that you're going to move the data over. Train them ahead of time. Don't train them after the fact, because they're going to be more stressed out if they don't know where to find things. But if you've trained them on what QBO looks like, how it works, then the only thing that you have to do afterwards is figure out what's specific to their issues and their workflows and their transactions. And then that way you can find those bottlenecks and solve those bottlenecks. So build it in, whether it's one person or a team of 20 people, use the sample files, use the free training documentation that comes with in your ProAdvisor portal, and give them those trainings. Maybe go into Craig's Landscaping and have them try out their routine transactions, so that they can become familiar with the new layout and the new procedures, but then also troubleshoot what are you going to have to build in for their workflows that will give you an idea of what's to come. And we also at RoyalWise provide this service. We have classes that you can sign them up for that give them that basic familiarity, the fundamentals of QuickBooks Online. But you definitely put the training before the cut date so that after the cut date, you're not giving them a tour, you're debugging. Okay, you also could give them a book. I'm almost done with the stuff about me, but here is this is a book that I wrote that is all of my fundamentals. And then that way, when they need to know, like, how do I do a progress invoice, they can just look it up right there. And that gives them that physical security as well. And so that book is also on Amazon. Okay, so the next thing is, before you do a migration, you want to do a needs assessment and find out exactly what they want to, how they want it to operate. When you are doing a needs assessment, don't just talk to the owner. Talk to the people who are actually using the software. Who are the managers? Who are the clerks? Who are out there in the field service? And what data do they need? And then I find sometimes, like, the field service technician always wishes that they knew what date the project was originally booked. Well, hey, you could use a custom field for that at intake, and then that way everybody has what they need. So I like to hear from everybody what they would like to see and what data they would like to have. And then when I do the conversion, I build it in as if that's how QBO is supposed to be used. And they don't even know the difference. And then they have a customized, bespoke experience using their own QuickBooks Online software. Okay. Also, of course, you do have to make sure and confirm that they're a good fit. Do they have internet access? Are there features that they use in desktop that aren't in online? And if so, is it okay that they don't have it anymore? Is there a feature in QuickBooks Online that you can do instead? Or do you need an app? Or are they okay about just letting it go? I also find at this point that a lot of the time there's apps that they're using or workflows or spreadsheets that they're using that they're not going to have to use anymore. Like maybe I had a company who was in field services, and they were tracking all of their AR in a separate spreadsheet because they couldn't get what they needed out of QBO. They were making dashboards, and or desktop. Now in QBO, the dashboards gave them everything that they were dumping into the spreadsheet on a regular basis, so they didn't even need the spreadsheet anymore. So I'm always keeping an eye on things like that. Okay, so I take a look when I'm doing the needs assessment. I take a look at what they're doing. What are their AR and AP workflows? What project management software are they using? What are they doing for time tracking? What are they doing for payroll? What are their current integrations? Then I take a look at the features that they're using in desktop and go through the list of everything that they're using and make sure that everything they're using is going to migrate seamlessly. Is there things that won't migrate? Are there things that they're going to need to do differently? Is there information they're using that isn't going to convert? We need to plan ahead for that. And are there things that are going to need to be rebuilt and reset up? And so I make sure in my needs assessment and my scope document that I'm accounting for all of these things that are going to need to happen and how long are they going to take me to help them with. We also take a look at whether they should do a fresh start. If you're looking at the reports and their balance sheet is full of liabilities that they don't have anymore, or fixed assets that they've disposed of, or their reports are just wildly off, maybe you don't migrate them. Maybe you do a fresh start. If they're full of products and service items that they're not using anymore and customers they haven't seen in 10 years and vendors that they don't use anymore, then maybe you don't migrate. Maybe you export your lists, clean them up, and then import them into QBO, get the trial balance off of last year's taxes and use that as your starting point, and then just go ahead and start fresh. And you can always keep the old file as a reference, or now that it's subscription based, print out all the reports that you could ever wish and have a binder that represents all of their old data so you have a cross reference. Now, all of this is a paid assessment. You do not do this for free. It's the first stage of your project planning. And as I'm doing these needs assessments, there's a link on your screen right now. There's a bit.ly to an Intuit QB checklist copy. They made maybe 5 years ago. It has not been updated recently. It is not complete and up to date, but I love this spreadsheet that basically it gives me a list of, do they have him run payroll? Yes. How many employees? Do they do this? Do they need this? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then it goes and it tells you what version of QuickBooks Online they're going to need. Do they need Plus? Do they need Advanced? Can they get away with Essentials? And so as I'm doing this needs assessment with them, I always record it. Usually it's over Zoom, so I just record it. I also love the new Fathom plugin, Fathom.video. And so I will record the session of the needs assessment where I'm meeting with the owner and all of the key players and getting all of their feedback. And then I give them the copy of the spreadsheet and of the video. That way, even if for some reason they don't use me for the migration, they still have all of that initial groundwork done and they've gotten something for their money. You've been paid for your time. So that works really, really well for me. People are asking where you can get the slides. Gary will send out the PDF of the slideshow to you. Okay. So now I have a section here on which version of QuickBooks Online is right for you. I know I'm speaking to an audience who knows all of this, so I'm not going to go into the differences between them. So you will best fit them into the right version. But then I also think about the other modules that can be added: merchant services, the online bill pay, payroll, contractor payments, and QuickBooks checking, and assess whether these features are right for them. I usually wind up signing them up for almost all of these. Okay. Now, as a pro advisor, don't forget that you get wholesale pricing on the QBO subscriptions. And something they're doing that is brand new, that was just announced a few weeks ago, is you can now split your subscription pricing so you can put people on your wholesale plan for their QBO subscription, but have them direct pay for payroll or QB payments or online bill pay, the ones that have the variable costs, so that they don't overuse it and you get caught short. So you do now have the ability to have them pay for their variable costs and you pay for the fixed cost QuickBooks subscription. I'm also a big fan of working with QuickBooks service providers. The one that I use is completebusinessgroup.com, and I have a link on the page there. They give me a landing page where I can place my orders with them, and then we get a 12-month discount in at the 30% and a bunch of other benefits as well. So I love working with my local QSP. A lot of you guys out there on the call are QSPs, and so please work with each other. Now, when you're doing the conversion itself, first thing that we need to do is look at what is different. So I'm going to get into some detail. So all of your transactions are going to convert. All of the list fields that are in both desktop and QBO are going to convert. All of the relevant settings are going to convert. Your memorized transactions now are going to convert. Some things that change though. Inventory changes from average cost to FIFO. Other names comes over as vendors. If you have employees who are paid in this fiscal year, even if they're inactive, they're going to come over as active, but then you can inactivate them afterwards. The payroll history comes over as summarized. You do not get the payroll detail, meaning that you can see how much was paid on a particular liability or how much was collected on a particular liability, but the paychecks themselves don't have all of the granular detail. In fact, if you have it set up with main levels and sub levels, sometimes it doesn't come over to the sub level detail. All of the summaries come up at the root level. So you would just see all of it under payroll expenses or payroll liabilities instead of broken out into the different state agencies or federal agencies. Hopefully that makes sense. So just in a summary, the paychecks themselves are summarized, the reports are summarized, and the balances are summarized. If you have item types in QBO, or in desktop, that are not in QBO, they will come over as either non-inventory or services. Basically, QBO doesn't have payment types and doesn't have sales tax types. So those are all going to come over as services. Sales tax is also completely different, and you no longer need to micromanage your sales tax in desktop by having different line items for each local sales tax. QuickBooks Online will take care of it as long as you set it up correctly. So those items are not going to be needed anymore. Now, there are some things that don't convert at all. Vendor discount terms, those are the ones that are like 1% net 10, 1% net 10, meaning if you pay within 10 days, you get 1% off. Those don't come over. They come over by name, but they don't actually function. Your attachments don't convert. You still do have your attachments folder in desktop, and you should save that folder that has all of the attachments, but you're not going to have the attachments attached to each individual transaction anymore. Inventory assemblies don't convert. You can rebuild them as bundles, but QuickBooks Online does not have units of measure at all. And if units of measure is crucial to building assemblies and how they work, then you're going to want to just move them to QuickBooks Desktop Enterprise, or use an app like Katana or SOS Inventory, because QBO won't do it natively. Balance sheet budgets don't convert. Custom form styles don't convert. In fact, the custom forms are completely different than the layout designer, and you don't have the granular detail to pick things up and drag them where you want them to go. It's a little bit more limited. At first, I find people are like, but I want it to look like it's always looked. But you know, when has a client ever not done business with you because they didn't like what your invoice looked like? It's one of those things you can really just let go of. Okay, third-party apps. Some of them will just need to be hooked up to your QBO. You just log in and boom, they'll integrate. Others, you need to start a new account. It really does depend on the app. If you're coming over from QuickBooks for Mac, it does not convert inventory. You actually need to convert the QuickBooks to Mac to QuickBooks to Windows and then do the import. So unless you're using QuickBooks for Mac and you're going to start using a third-party inventory app, then you can go ahead and do your conversion. Okay, the next batch is what you're going to need to fix. There are some things that are kind of a problem in the conversion depending on your situation, and you do have to do some manual labor and plan on the time to do this. So progress invoices lose their connection to their estimates. The estimates are still there. The progress invoices are still there, but the link between the two breaks. What that means is you need to open up the progress invoice and then grab the estimate and put the estimate back in and then move the line item totals into the estimate lines. It's really laborious. It's really painstaking. Yes, Intuit knows it's a problem. I generally only will do that for open projects that are current. I won't go back and fix the history for closed jobs, just what's active right now. In the same way, bills and purchase orders lose their connection. You'll have the original purchase order, you'll have the original bill, but the bill will not close the purchase order. So you open up the bill, you add the purchase order, and then you're good to go. If your system has been running off of journal entries and transactions that were made out to accounts receivable and accounts payable, for example, I was working with a Chamber of Commerce where all of their membership dues were through Chamber of Commerce software. And when it imported, it didn't import invoices and sales receipts. It just imported journal entries. What happened is after the conversion, when you run the AR aging summary, you had a giant list of every customer with 0 on it. So when you look at an AR aging summary and it has a 0, it means that you have AR and you have the invoice and you have the payment, but the payment's not paying off the invoice. So what you have to do for every single customer is say receive payment, and then you check off all of the invoices or AR side, and you check off all the payments or the credits. And usually you can just check everything off all in one shot and it all equals 0. And then when you save it, it ties it all together in a nice little bundle with the ribbon. And then it falls off of your AR aging summary. So I build this into my scope, knowing that it's going to happen. I tell them ahead of time that we're going to need to do this. Sales orders are a feature that don't come over. You're going to actually use estimates instead of sales orders. Okay, now everything that I just told you is always changing. In the 5 or 6 years, there were things that didn't come over at all that now do come over. So there's this big fat link that's there on my screen. And again, we will get you the PDF for this. I may actually be able to, at the end, I'll drop the PDF in, but there's a article on Intuit's website that is everything for what to expect when you make the switch. And so I always actually refer back to that link to make sure that my expectations meet the reality. And a lot of the time I'm like, hey, we don't have to do that anymore. Great, we just saved some time. And then, like I said, if you want some detailed explanations of everything that I just said, that book that I wrote has more information about all of it. Okay, now when you're doing your conversion, you definitely want to clean up first. There's certain things that you want to clean up before you migrate. So the first thing is that the file can't be too big. Your reports, even though QBO is kind of indefinite, some of your reports might bog down. What you do is you press F2 on your keyboard or Control 1, and it brings up this information. And you look at the one that says total targets, and it has to be less than 750,000. If it's not less than 750,000 targets, you're going to need to condense your desktop file first. Pick a date, 3 years back, 5 years back, however far you actually need the current data, and then do a condense to that point, and that will reduce your number of targets. Now, when you are getting ready to convert in desktop, you do have to have QuickBooks 2021 or more recent. And then what you want to do is you want to run an update on it. Now, I'm not saying update from 2021 to 2024. I mean, within the version that you have, like let's say you have 2022, run the maintenance updates in that 2022 version because it actually includes the migration tool and updates to the migration tool in it. So always update your QBO to the latest maintenance release. You'll make a backup of your current file, although you really don't have to worry. It does not touch your desktop file at all. You can turn off some of the preferences if you want. I generally actually skip that step myself. but I do like to inactivate old customers, vendors, and items before I move over. And the reason for that is when you do the migration, it will only pull in active customers, active vendors, and active items within the time frame. And if you inactivate them before migrating, then they won't come over to QBO. So if you waited until after you migrate, then they're going to be in QuickBooks Online, but inactivated so that you can reactivate them. So you can decide if you want to be able to access the history, wait to inactivate them until you're in QuickBooks Online. If you don't want them in QBO at all, inactivate them in Desktop before your migration. Then your last step is to do a verify and rebuild your data. Make sure the file is all healthy before you import. Okay, I'm going to run another poll. I'm actually running a few minutes behind. Okay, how do you approach the majority of your conversion projects? Maybe you don't do conversions, say that. Do you migrate the file and let the client do the rest? Do you do the migration and most of the setup for the client? Do you do cleanups after the data? Do you consult on their business operations and do all of this planning? So this is kind of going back to that slide I had on how do you approach the rest of the cleanups. And we are pretty much spread across them with the very, very few, almost none, migrate the file and let the client do the rest. So either about 25% of you aren't doing them. 25% of you do most of the migration and the setup. About 30% of you take the time to clean up the data afterwards, and about a little under 25% are actually doing this full consultation that I've been talking about. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, excellent. Good. Yeah, there's all different kinds of ways of doing a conversion. Like I said, this is an opportunity for you. Okay, so now we're going to get into how to do the import. Now, inside each of the kinds of software, there is a menu command where you can do the import. So if you're in QuickBooks Desktop Pro or Premier, it's under Company, Export to QuickBooks Online. If it's Enterprise, there's no menu item. You have to actually do an F2 and then do Control B, Control Q, and then the migration tool will pop up. If you're using QuickBooks for Mac, File, Export to QuickBooks Online. But if you don't even have QuickBooks Desktop, but you have a QuickBooks file, or you want to use the latest and greatest tool, there's a link here that's really long and it looks like it's double. There's a whole bunch of different HTTPs in there, but it really is the link. They have an online tool where you can upload the file and it will do the conversion. And so maybe you've let go of your ProAdvisor desktop membership and you don't even have a copy of Desktop. You don't need it. You can use that big, fat, ugly link right there in order to do the conversion. So again, I'll get you the slides when I can take a deep breath. Okay, when you start the conversion, it will ask you to log in. I recommend using the client's login instead of your login, just to make absolutely sure that you don't overwrite your own data, because I have heard horror stories about that. Then once you log in, it will start the migration process. Sometimes it takes 20 minutes, sometimes it takes 2 hours, depending on how big the file is, but you will get an email when it's ready, when it's time. Then the very next thing you do is verify the data. And the way that you do that is run your balance sheet and your profit and loss report in both programs, accrual basis, all dates. That way it captures all the activity in the two files. They should match, although the inventory, the average cost and FIFO layers are going to be a little bit different. So I generally find the balance sheet and the P&L are both off by about the same dollar amount for what came over to cost of goods and inventory asset. Those two number differentials should still equal each other. Note that if it's a large company and you're moving over from Desktop to Online, average cost of FIFO, you might actually need to file a form with the IRS letting them know that you changed your inventory basis. Okay, now if they don't match, if it's something small, maybe it's something that you can adjust, but sometimes this is your chance to go, oh, wait, this did not work. I need to back up and do it again. In which case you can just go do the upload a second time and overwrite all your data and just make sure your hands off and don't touch it and let it do its thing. And it should come over right. Okay, now, once I've done the conversion, the first thing, not the first thing, but one of the things that I like to do is redo my reconciliations, because the reconciliation status of all of the items came over. So everything that had an R is an R, but it says you've never done a reconciliation because it hasn't been done in QBO. So you just repeat your most recent reconciliation, last month's or whenever the last one was done, and then it should just be a zero reconciliation, and then you're done. However, I generally find when I go in to do this that there's been stray transactions sitting there since 2021, and this is my time to start doing a little bit of cleanup and say, well, why is this here and why is this here? And I find errors from the old file, and this is a great opportunity to fix that. Okay, then, like I said, with this is your chance to clean up. So I've already mentioned most of these already, that your AR aging summary, if you see zeros on it, then just add a payment that ties the two of them together. If you have billable expenses on the money bar, those are the ones that got marked off in desktop. There's a link on my screen right now, qbo.intuit.com/app/manage billable expense. That is not on the menu. And what you do is you pick a date like today, and then it will go through the file and wipe out all of those check marks that were making things as billable. Now, it only can do a couple hundred, so you might, instead of just doing it today, you might need to do 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, now, in order to do them in batches. But this is a miracle. Now, if for any reason it doesn't work, because actually the developers forget that it's there, and so sometimes it breaks until I knock on their door and say, hey, can you go reactivate that tool again? And so if it's not working, your other option is to make an invoice for the customer, pull in all of the billable expenses and save it, and then void it. And that will also clear them up. However, you do have to do it for every customer who has them. Okay, then I go into my list cleanups. I go into the payment methods and I tailor the payment methods to their needs. I look at the terms and I take off the net 60 because they're not using it. I'll go in and look at their customer list and inactivate people. Maybe we'll merge vendors. Maybe they had all of the restaurants that they've ever eaten at in every single airport all listed. One of the things that's different about QuickBooks Online versus desktop is the bank feed includes the bank detail with every single transaction, and there's an option to copy that bank detail into the memo, which eliminates the need to have every single parking lot, gas station, and restaurant that you've ever eaten at. You can make generics and then rename the old vendors, Hudson News, just rename it to, um, you know, uh, travel sundries or something like that. And then it'll bring together all of those transactions in one list. And then with restaurants, you get a list of every restaurant you've ever been to. And moving forward, you're still going to have all of that information for what the actual name was. Now, I don't recommend that for every restaurant, only the ones that you don't need to store the name. Okay, I need to move faster than this. Okay, then I look at the chart of accounts, and we inactivate categories that were never used or that are no longer needed, or maybe we merge duplicated accounts, and I take an opportunity to rearrange the chart of accounts to give them the information that they want from now on instead of what they were looking at. This is that opportunity for that fresh start. What information do they need? So this is a great time to clean it up. And usually when I'm done cleaning up the chart of accounts, the business owner is like beside themselves because now their reports actually make sense and give them actionable data. Okay, I'll do the last poll at the end. Okay, so now the next thing that you want to do is customize your file. Go through all of the account and settings with the owner and the key players, and go through all of the sections and turn on and off the different features that they're going to need. If you have opening inventory, when you're setting up new inventory products, don't make sure you don't use today's date and quantity. Backdate it by a couple years and put in a quantity of 0. And then that way you can enter in all your open bills and invoices and then do an inventory quantity adjustment to square up and true up your numbers. I generally find that that's the best approach. Catherine is asking, going back to the chart of accounts, do I, do I do that before QBO or after the migration? This is one that I do after the migration because I want their file to represent the way that they've always had it and their original data, and then their QBO is their fresh start. But that's just my approach. You really could do it either way. Okay, go in and do their custom form styles. This is one of those concierge ones. Usually I'll say to them, do you want me to do this or do you want to do it? Some people will be like, oh yeah, no, I got that. Thanks for showing me where it is. Others really want me to go through this with a fine tooth comb with them. Okay, then the next setup steps after that is I take a look at all of QBO's built-in modules and assess whether they would be a good fit. So I sign almost everybody up for merchant services, even if they have a POS system or they're doing e-commerce sales, because I find occasionally being able to send an invoice and get payment from that invoice is handy for them. So I'm not going to go into the details for why QuickBooks Payments Merchant Services, but I sign everybody up. If you are, this is one of the things I like about working with a QuickBooks service provider, a QSP, because I actually get residuals on all of their sales. I mean, it's pennies on the dollar, but it comes to several $100 a month for me, as opposed to just signing them up in product. I will set up their sales tax. We'll turn on the sales tax module, set up the state, set up the local taxes if the state has local taxes. But then we go through the whole sales tax process and make sure that all the right products are set up as taxable and what kind of tax is applicable to each of the items. Because like I said, sales tax is 100% different in desktop and QBO. I have a whole course that really just goes into the nitty gritty, but I'll go into every single product and make sure that every product has the right tax type. I'll go through the customers and make sure customers who are exempt are truly exempt. And then I'll go into the sales tax center and look at all of the past taxes and make sure that they all matched up. Sometimes I have to go through the sales tax center and mark it as paid in the sales tax center, make the adjustments to make it match the payment that was made, and then delete the original payment. I generally wind up cleaning up the sales tax balance sheet during this section. It's complicated, but so rewarding. So this is, if they're using sales tax, I will generally build it into the scope. Same thing with payroll. Payroll will port over, but more or less successfully, depending on how complicated it is. But we'll put in the, we'll verify all of the year-to-date numbers. Sometimes you need to actually go in and put in the tax payment history so it knows what taxes have already been paid. And then I'll just go in and do a cleanup there. Sometimes it's just done and there's nothing I need to do. Sometimes it gets really complicated. One of the things that is different in QBO's payroll is that it will have its own chart of accounts categories that are different from what was in desktop. And I will need to sometimes either transfer the balances, merge the accounts, or inactivate the old accounts to just use the new accounts. Things like garnishments, every employee with a garnishment gets their own garnishment account. So the chart of accounts is actually the biggest place where the payroll adjustments have to happen. We'll take a look at the project center. There's nothing in desktop remotely like the project center. And the majority of my big conversions, this is their favorite place and their favorite thing. So we totally transform how they're doing their job costing, how they're doing their timesheets using QuickBooks Time, and build in all of their job profitability. And so this is one of those big opportunities for you to do a concierge conversion, because if Project Center is right for them, you are going to be the hero. They are going to love you because the Project Center is amazing and not in desktop. Okay, there's also receipt capture. I will go in there with them. I will help them set up their customized email address and show them how they can take pictures with their phones, how they can upload, how they can forward from email. And so I'll actually show them this. And a lot of the time, this is another thing that totally changes how they've been relating to their field service guys. So this is another huge opportunity to be a hero. After all that has been done is when we add in the user accounts. So we'll go in and make sure that they have the right permissions levels, whether they're admin, we'll add in their accountant users, we'll put in custom users. There's also users just for QuickBooks payments using GoPayment that are free. You can have free logins just for time cards. And then plus you can do reports only users, and in advance you get granular permissions across absolutely everything. Okay, the next thing that I do is set up the banking feed. I'll go in and help them connect to all of their banks. Usually I do this through a screen share and I have them do it because their passwords are all saved on their computer. So we'll go in and set up their checking accounts, savings accounts, credit cards, exclude the personal cards. And sometimes we actually have to go back even further, in which case we log in at the bank's website and get the data and then import it in and do all the categorization in the banking feed to get them caught up. In particular, this is extremely helpful if you're doing a fresh start, like maybe you decided that you're doing it as of January, and here we are in July. I can actually, by using the banking feed and importing historic transactions, I can actually usually get a whole year of quick and dirty data in a few hours or maybe a few days. Of course, you lose all of the granular detail, but you can at least womp it all into place. And then as of July 1st, have your real data. So sometimes having a mid-year strategy is worth it as well. Now, when you connect a bank account, it may notice the history, but it also might add in an extra opening balance equity entry in the register that is already marked as reconciled, which makes it really hard to find. And so it's probably wrong based on other historic transactions. So usually I can just delete it, or sometimes I have to edit it to subtract out transactions before that date. But look for that because it'll drive you crazy. The next thing that I do is I work with them to create rules, especially if I have months of data entry to do. And then we'll go in and we'll make rules that will just chunk all of the data into the right buckets and then delete those rules and create real rules for their real operations. Okay, and then the last thing that I do is I take a look at their third-party apps. I'm not going to sell you guys on apps. You all know about apps. But so we'll either migrate their existing apps or connect new apps. And when I'm having the conversation about apps with a business owner, a lot of the time they're like, but I'm already paying so much for QBO. Why should I have to pay for an app as well? But if the app saves time, and you, like, let's say it saves an hour a week and the employee is paid $25 an hour, then that's $100 right there. And if the app is less than $100, then you just saved money. So there is almost always ROI, not just on the apps, but actually on QuickBooks Online itself. So this is what I build into the conversation. Now, what I want to leave you with here is, again, revisiting the style of the services, that this is why I call it a concierge service and why I offer it as an option, not just like, here's what we're going to do, but I upsell all of these things that I just showed you so that they have the confidence that their data is rock solid and transformed. That, you know, again, sometimes it's just picking it up from desktop, moving it to online, you're good to go. But sometimes it's a complete overhaul of their entire company's functioning. And this is an opportunity for you to, exercise your chops, gain expertise, gain new revenue streams, and up your game as well. Okay. And Catherine is actually mentioning that this is awesome, not just from desktop to online, but you can use this when you're doing any kind of conversion. Like she's doing a Mass 90 right now. So just as a reminder, if you want to hear me and Hector go off about all of these different topics, check out episodes 23 to 28 of our show. And if you want the documentation for all of this, I just wrote a book that's on Amazon that's $10 that goes into explanations of everything I just through. So it's all there for you. So I'm going to do our last poll. And do you do training for your clients switching over from desktop? Do you give them Intuit's documents from the Pro Advisor portal? Do you give them hands-on training yourself after the migration? Do you send them to YouTube to get their questions answered, like from Hector? Do you sign them up with QuickBooks Live, which is a really good use case for them? If you're like, I don't want QuickBooks Live, their new Expert Assist program where they can just call up and say, how do I make a progress invoice? That is a good use for QuickBooks Live right there. Do you use QuickBooks Online training through independent consultants like Royal Wise or Gentle Frog? Or do you take some other approach to your training? So go ahead and answer that last poll for your CPE. And that I think is just about everything that I've got. So I know that I fire hosed you with information. Hopefully, I gave you some new information and things to watch out for that are going to be really helpful. If you want to head over to the chat, um, the then I'm willing to take questions. Oh, a question just came in from Merrill. What's the difference between this red book and my other blue book? This red book is just doing migrations. My book, I'm now making a whole book series. So the new red book is just what I just talked about how do I migrate from desktop to online. This book is what do I do once I got there? How do I actually use QBO? So that's the difference between those books. Okay, it looks like most people have answered the poll, so we are going to call it good. Thank you all for coming today, and I will see you in August.
Great. All right. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you so much, everybody who took an hour out of your day to get a little CPE and just learn some really good information about that migration option. So, um,
Okay, and
Alicia, any other what's your Royal Wise what's your website? Like if they couldn't get those links, what's just the easiest place to go?
either royalwise.com or learn.royalwise.com takes you straight to my trainings themselves. I
Okay.
did just upload the PDF into the chat. I think a couple of people left and missed it, but the PDF of today's slides are all there.
Great. And
And
as
so
Alicia said, we will send that out to you in the follow-up and your CPE within about 48 hours, probably 24, but we're going to give ourselves an extra day. So you should see that again within the next 2 days. Again, Alicia, thank you. Everybody else, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you all very soon.